This is Channel 253. Beep, boop, boop, boop.
On this episode of the Grit and Grain podcast.
But the head brewer at the time, the first day of the job, I think I said something that made it sound like I was vaguely enthusiastic about anything, and he just looked at me just like, well, you'll soon get bored of it.
Jeez.
I was like, all right. It's like remembering I'm in England.
Yeah.
Anyway, he was obviously over it. He quit that day. He was the head brewer, and so, you know.
That sounds like somebody's last cry.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Grit and Grain podcast, where we explore and celebrate the craft beer industry, community, and history in Tacoma, Washington, and surrounding Pacific Northwest areas. Thank you so much for hanging out. Let's get to it. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Grit and Grain podcast, coming to you guys from the Parkway Tavern in Tacoma, Washington. My name is Matt McLaren, here, of course, with Ron Swarner.
Hello.
How are you, sir?
I'm great. How about you?
Very good. And Sean Jackson.
Hello, everyone.
How's it going, dude?
Great.
Awesome. So thank you, as always, for listening and hanging out and listening to goofy, nerdy beer stories about Tacoma and everywhere else. If you're ever in town in Tacoma and you want to stop by the Parkway Tavern on Wednesdays when we hang out and record, you're certainly welcome to do that. Space is limited, but it's fun having people here. So hi, you guys. So our guest today is somebody that we've wanted to talk to for a bit, which is usually the story. I usually start with that, but it's always people that we really want to talk to. This person in particular does something that nobody else does, and he does it in a way that nobody else does. And so this is exciting. Yeah, Sean, who are we talking to today?
We're talking to Bill from Machine House Brewing.
Hello.
What's up, Bill?
Yeah. Thank you for
See
coming.
you guys. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
No, we were already bullshitting before we turned mics on about all the kind of stuff that we want to talk about. But before I forget, what are you drinking, Bill?
I am drinking the Bizarre Brewing Oat Bitter. Very delicious. I highly recommend.
Are you like some kind of authority on oat bitters?
You know, I don't know what bitter means. That's a new style to me, but
But you
sure
fuck with oats, though?
You know, yeah. I tried to stick to oats for the cholesterol, you know. Yeah.
So for anybody who doesn't know, Bizarre Brewing is like a pretty fresh project by a couple of like well-known folks in the industry. But I love that they started off actually with like really basic, like, you know, essential styles. And so far they've like executed like really well.
Yeah, I'm super excited to see what they came out with as their first, you know, selection of beers and session beers, balanced beers,
Yep.
you know.
And a fresh hop pilsner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
And a Kolsch wit beer.
Yeah.
That was bizarre.
That was
It's like, I don't know where to put this on the lineup. Maybe here. Worked out great. It's delicious.
Sean, what do you have?
I also have the bizarre teenage
more beer,
Jesus.
more beer than hands again.
Yeah. I
Three
also
beers in front of it.
all teenage Jesus aside, I think baby Jesus that I've got the Machine House Dark Mild pulling through our cask engine.
Yeah.
Which I also think all the Jesus is for. And a little bit of Hale's wheat wine, just because.
Nice.
Yeah.
Not a barley wine, but close.
I think Matt and I
Kissing
are also thanking the Jesuses.
For the dark mild, yeah. We're both drinking dark mild.
Nice.
Might switch it up halfway through, but it's fucking lovely.
It is lovely.
There's almost nobody that makes this style of beer. So
Not yet. Maybe one day.
I know, right? You're gonna change that. I hope so. It's like the most food friendly like beer in existence. You can have like 4 of them, and it's I don't know if that's an encouraging point.
Or 12.
Or 12, and like yeah, you can still stumble home.
Yeah,
and
I
not
think
fall.
12 is about the max. I think that's
Yeah.
about the max.
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
seen, yeah.
For anybody who hasn't had a dark mild, just like it's like a stout or a porter. It's got the roasty malt flavor in it, but it's really light. It's like usually under 4% or around there. and it has all of those like roasty kind of like full-bodied like espresso chocolatey flavors, but it's much easier to drink. It's not as chewy. It's like sessionable, and it really does go super well with food. So if you have not tried a dark mild before, you should come to the Parkway before the one that's on cask right now goes.
Good idea.
Or to Machine House, like
Or up to Machine
any
House.
day of the week that we're open. We always have it on.
So for anybody who doesn't know, where is Machine House located?
Our location right now is in Georgetown on Airport Way. We're in the original Rainier Brewery building. Really cool old historic building. We have a tap room there where we've got 7 beer engines that we're pouring cask ales, cellar temperature, try and do it as, close to perfect as we can. Wednesday through Sunday every week. That's it. It's a cask ale tap room. We're just really focused on pouring these traditional English beers in the best way possible, kind of the way it has to be.
And the way it has to be. I like that. So why do you, like you say, as close to perfect as you can make it, which is like you're referring to a particular type of beer. Why should people choose this over anything else that we might have available here?
Well, I mean, at Machine House, you should choose it because it's, for a long time, it was the only thing we offered. So that's, we didn't give people a choice. In general, I'd kind of almost advise people against ordering it in some places because the point is that if it's not served right, if it's not presented right, if it's not designed right from the beginning, they're not typically going to be the best beer you can get,
Meaning like buying a beer on cask.
Yeah, I think that for a long time and still now, like buying a beer on cask is going to be a bit of a gamble for a lot of people.
Sure.
Like, is that beer designed well? Is it, does it suit itself to being served on cask? And does the place that's serving it kind of know what they're doing as far as like making sure it's fresh, making sure it's the right temperature, making sure it's had enough time to settle so that it's going to pour clearly if that's an important part of the beer.
Right.
So for us our brewery is focused on making cask ales as well as possible since we opened in 2013. And for me, a big focus has just been to make sure that we serve it make it as well as possible and try and ensure that it's served as well as possible so that you get that optimum experience. It's a beer style that to me is when it's served really well, when the beer is pouring right, it's a really elite beer experience. It's above anything else for me. I mean, I'm biased because I'm British and it's what I grew up with. But even just as a brewer, I mean, I taste a lot of different beers. I drink a lot of different stuff. And I still think when it's served just right and it's fresh and it's pouring just right, for me, it's really a level above a lot of other stuff. It's really on the kind of top echelon of beer drinking experiences you can get.
An elite beer experience.
However,
I'm stealing that.
if it's served wrong, if it's too warm, if it's too flat, the things that people don't like about what they think cask ale is like, then it's terrible. It's rubbish. Nobody should like it. Nobody should have to drink it. And it happens too often, and that's to some extent out of the control of the brewer. Of course, we're a brewery that has a tap room, so we get to brew the beer and then serve it the way we want to. But we're also selling wholesale.
Not every bar has like a traditional drayman, like who can
of course
babysit actual casks. It's just different now.
Good point. The Cellarman Award.
The actual cellarman,
right?
Yeah,
right.
So, very prestigious award, is my understanding, and it's not here in our country. But as far as running your cellar and making sure that all your beers are being delivered optimally, it's a big deal.
It's a very important thing. And there's a whole culture around it in the UK, and that doesn't exist here, which does make life difficult for, a brewery trying to kind of, focus around that style.
Oh yeah, your balls were huge coming out the gate. I remember that.
Yeah, I was an idiot.
I
you
mean,
know?
well, no, it was like, well, I mean, so in Tacoma, we actually had a lot more cask engines in our town than we currently do.
Yeah,
Like
that's
the
right, yeah.
numbers have been greatly reduced over the last, well, since you opened.
Yeah, and especially
And,
the last couple of
I
years.
remember
yeah.
thinking that as like, that is the greatest fucking concept. Wow, that's gonna be hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think in the UK, cask beer, in general, and still now, I think is centers around fairly classic styles for the most part. Bitters. I mean, mostly best bitter, ordinary bitter. Maybe you get milds and stouts in some parts of the country more than others. Bitters and pale ales for the most part. In the US, there has been a cask beer, component of craft beer culture for a while. And at least when I moved here, which was 2010, it seemed like most of that culture was centered around, I mean, sure, it's a cask conditioned beer served on a beer engine or on gravity, but there was a tendency for it to be kind of novelty beers, basically.
Yeah, it was like a kitschy like subculture in the craft
Yeah,
beer world.
I mean, I think essentially people would take firkins, which is the classic format for a cask beer to be, delivered in, and because it had a bunghole, people put weird things in that bunghole, whether that's more hops or gummy bears or jalapenos or whatever it happens to be. And, novelty beers is...
I'm not explaining that
I don't
for
know, maybe
everybody.
novelty beers is a demeaning term, but it's like beers with beers with infusions in them.
right. Because they had the easy access,
Yeah.
because there was a part of the cask that you could open and throw shit into it.
Yeah.
Which is
And-
what the bunghole is.
And those things can be great. Like, there's definitely an important place for that in craft beer world. But for me, for cask beer, it's like that should be like saved for the classic styles that are like really work best and are just, like I say, taken to another level with like proper cask serving.
Sure.
And so, I mean, when we started, we just had a best bitter, a dark mild, and a golden ale, and
Right.
just like very restrained styles, classic styles that we were like, we're going to make these two, like, we're going to raise eyebrows by being, this sort of returning to these classic styles and
Right.
trying to do them well.
Yeah. The fact that they are exceptional makes the difference there. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of people kind of
And
mess
if-
with classic stuff, but it's different when it's exceptional. You're just like, holy cow! Like you said, it's a different experience.
Yeah. And if they're not exceptional, then nobody's going to give a shit.
Yeah.
And they're not going to
Not in-
sell.
not in
and
Seattle,
this
man.
isn't going to happen.
It's gotta be good.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I was just like I say, I was just chatting with some of the brewers over at E9 and saying, we're talking about people focusing on lagers these days. Breweries maybe focusing on lagers a lot more, and like maybe that's seeming like a sort of a niche, and maybe it's a little bit easier to sell those now than it used to be, but still it's like,
True life.
it's outside the like really, dominant focus of the craft beer world. But I mean, in comparison, like what we do, trying to sell traditional real ales, it's hard for me to imagine anybody picking a more difficult path than we have.
Sure.
Yep.
But, for me, that was just like the path that made sense.
But it's
It just-
honest.
yeah.
authentic.
So, Bill, where did you learn your trade?
Well, I suppose in the pub. I mean, I grew up in the UK in Norfolk, East Anglia, and I think my first job was in a pub washing dishes, and I would have a little half pint of Adnams bitter at the end of my shift when I was 15, and I kind of just got into drinking real ale that way at that time from a pretty young age. Yeah, always a fan of those English bitters, basically, which is not for everybody, especially in England. I mean, a lot more people drink, import lagers than drink cask bitter in England.
Sure.
But
It's,
I suppose I
similar
was,
to the craft community.
I think for me as like a kid, I was sort of the weird one who liked the,
The weird stuff.
the cask
nerdy
bitter.
stuff.
And then when I was at college, it was like the cheapest beer on the menu. Like we had a pub on campus. So when I was there at 18, it was like the cheapest beer on the menu was this locally brewed English pale ale called Golden Jackal from Wolf Brewery. I think it was like £1.60 a pint at the time. And then the next cheapest was Foster's. And so most people drank Foster's
Sure.
because it's the cheapest. But I was like, well, actually, this is cheaper and it tastes really nice. But I was still the weird one drinking the real ale anyway. So anyway, I got into beer. I got into beer by drinking beer, and then some years later, I started home brewing a little bit. And pretty quickly after that, I applied for a job at a brewery close to where I grew up in Norfolk, and it was not a desirable job. It was, just a very small brewery, and it was not like...
Wasn't the glamorous shit you thought it was going to be?
Well, I didn't think it was going to be glamorous, and it didn't appear to be glamorous. I mean, this is 2008, I think. I got that job there at Tipples Brewery in Acle in Norfolk. And, it's like, I was like maybe 22, I think, at the time. And I was kind of enthusiastic because I'd just gotten into home brewing, and I was just, young and whatever. But the head brewer at the time, the first day of the job, I think I sort of said something that made it sound like I was vaguely enthusiastic about anything. And he just looked at me just like, well, you'll soon get bored of it.
Jeez.
I was like, all right. It's like remembering I'm in England.
Yeah.
Anyway, he was obviously over it. He quit that day. He was the head brewer, and so
That sounds like somebody's last cry.
yeah.
Good fucking luck, kid.
Owner was like, hey, Bill, guess what?
And so the owner just sort of trained me up to sort of do everything, and I learned that way pretty quickly, which is really good.
Jeez.
And really, I learned everything about making English style real ale there, and it's not the best education by any means. I mean, I feel like I've learned a lot more since I've been in the US and have been part of the...
Really?
Wow.
Well, yeah, I mean, and if I'd have stayed in England a lot longer, then I'm sure I would have learned a lot more.
Would you have gotten bored of it?
Probably, yeah. Well, the funny thing is, I tell people here is like, if I'd have stayed in England, I probably would have been trying to make more modern, probably American-inspired
beers,
styles, because that was really what was missing there at the time, especially back then in like 2009, 2010. Like, I mean, there really wasn't, like, I couldn't find IPAs anywhere because I'd had them in the US before that point. Like, the closest we could get in Norwich, where I was living at the time, was like you could buy like an expensive bottle of Sierra Nevada Pale Ale that was probably like a couple of years old at that point. But it was still like, oh, this has like
Flavor.
yeah, kind of. Yeah, it was like hops. Hops can taste, like we know they do now. So that was exciting to me, and so like I do think if I would have stayed there, I probably would have been doing something more in that realm. Whereas obviously moving over here, which I moved here in 2010, craft beer world just seemed really exciting. There was a lot going on, like people doing all kinds of things.
Did you come straight to Seattle?
Yeah, I mean, when I moved here permanently, I did, but I had lived in Oregon for a year before that when I was in college. Okay. So I tried beers then. It was difficult because I was 20, so I'd been drinking in England for like 5 years.
Oh, yeah.
At the time, I looked like I was 15 or something, so I couldn't buy beer anywhere. Mm-hmm.
That's so wild.
But I got other people to buy beer for me. It was fine.
Should have went to Canada.
Yeah. I did.
That was a sad story. I didn't know the drinking age was 19 in Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was up here, and I basically never went until I was 21.
dude.
Yeah.
Missed out,
No
man.
idea. It's horrible.
It's hard to drink in Canada.
I think I would have had an easy time drinking Canada as an American.
It's hard to drink beer
I
in
would have been just fine.
Yeah.
When you you were brewing as part of like the sort of UK craft beer community for a few years. When you came over here, did you notice like a huge difference in terms of like how the craft sort of segment of the beer world operates, like here versus the UK?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, craft beer wasn't a thing in the UK at all.
Yeah. But you had a few folks doing cask stuff, but it was
So
mostly the
yeah, I
imported
mean,
lagers.
there's been people doing cask beer since like I mean on and off for hundreds of years,
course.
but then especially more since like the late 70s, the camera movement sort of bringing back those smaller breweries, doing traditional cask beers.
Yep.
There's a weird crossover. I mean, I don't know how you sort of explain the difference between the cask beer world at that time in the UK. I mean, it is a craft beer. You know,
Right.
it is, small breweries, relatively small breweries making, it's not macro lager, you
Right.
know. But that versus the American craft beer movement, which was a little bit later. I mean, yeah, I think it's fair to say a little bit later. I mean, just a different trajectory of interests and, things going on.
Sure.
But that then became a thing in the UK.
Right.
Probably around that time. I mean, 2008, 2009, 2010.
They started bringing American
started
hops
to becoming,
over and like
I mean, I think of like the Colonel in London being maybe like one of the first ones I had where it's like, okay, this is more of a modern approach to beer. It's not cask ale. I mean, when I grew up, it was like you got cask bitter and you got lager, and that's beer. That's the whole. Oh, maybe if you go to the Belgian bar, you got like Abbey ales and stuff,
or a wet
but,
beer or something. Yeah.
there being any kind of in between wasn't a thing at the time, but I think that started becoming more visible around that time, 2010-ish,
Right.
maybe a little before.
So like right when you got here.
Yeah, when I left, yeah. And especially where I grew up is like several years behind the times, even for England. I mean, like, yeah, it's not, I love where I grew up, but yeah, it was not like the cultural, sort
In the
of,
sticks
Sort of
a little
mecca.
bit.
in the
Yeah.
sticks a little bit, yeah.
Did camera push back on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been here for a while now, so I don't know what the how the dialogue has entirely gone, over the years. But there's definitely for a while where camera was like, well, cask beer is the only good beer, and keg beer is the devil and will kill you, and should never be consumed by anybody ever.
And drink local.
And drink local, yeah. And I think, over the years, people were like, well, actually, you can make good craft beer locally made or, whatever in kegs, and you can serve it cold. And actually, that's pretty good. And I don't know, but I assume camera has kind of come around because, you can't argue that forever. Right.
They seem to be more accepting of. I know that the cider and Perry and a little bit more on the camera thing. So cultural difference, right? I don't understand the acronym. So camera is Campaign for Real Ale.
Yep.
Is it okay to take the first three letters of something to make an acronym just because you want to make a fucking word? Or is there something like, is there a organization that's the CRA that's like really don't want to be associated with it?
Oh, yeah.
Like the cheesy
CRA.
rotten assholes or something like that? Like, oh, no, I don't want to be CRA. Mm-mm.
I thought you were going to have like a legitimate critique over their like mostly dogmatic approach to like beer culture in the UK, but nope, just their acronym of their fucking
Yeah.
name.
Yeah. Oh, I'm with camera. Like, oh, you're a photographer. No. The fuck is... I just don't understand. I'm sorry. was wondering if you could shed any light. Like, is that a common thing?
You know, I don't know if it's common. I'd have to do a little research.
No, it's okay.
Don't rack your brain on that. I swear to God.
You know, it's got to be a marketing thing, right? I would say that, like, Americans really love their 3-letter acronyms. Everything has to be an IPA or a, you know,
That's fair.
NBA or NFL or whatever else. But maybe in England we like, you know, the sort of more sort of elaborate acronyms that, you know, give a little more license to, you know.
This is
I have this
podcast.
We have short attention spans.
I have this idea with a terrible acronym for this kind of beer festival event that probably never happened, but I like the idea of it. It's Crystal Malt Appreciation Day. No, Crystal Malt Awareness Day, and it's Cry Mad. Cry for Crystal Malt Awareness Day. Cry Mad.
There's your answer.
Doesn't make
Sean.
sense,
It's a
but, you
cultural
know.
See, it is a cultural thing. Like,
There you go.
Yeah.
I should trademark it before someone steals it. But, yeah.
trademark has happened, patent pending. Heard it here, folks.
Speaking of cry mad,
I cry mad every night on my sleep.
Yeah, we're going to take a super quick break, but we'll be right back to ask more questions and to tell some fuck-up stories. Welcome back. Thanks for hanging out during the break. As we usually do, I want to give a quick shout-out to Channel 253. Doug, our amazing producer, who makes us sound so professional every single week, is from Channel 253. Yay, Doug.
Thank you, Doug.
And him, along with his partner Eric, run a wonderful collection of podcasts that range from various topics, but all having to do with Tacoma. And if you're a part of this community and you want to stay connected, it's a great way to do it. Most of the podcasts are pretty quick. They're really succinct, and they're full of great info. If you want to stay connected, learn more about your city, about your community, go to channel253.com/membership and support those guys. All right. We all got a new beer after Bill sang the praises of that Bizarre beer. So now we're all drinking Bizarre's bitter.
All right.
And it's delicious.
Well, Bill and I are hitting that Single Hill
Oh, yeah?
Osa Minor Stout.
Nice.
Yeah, really delicious.
It's
yeah.
so good. It's so much lighter than you think it's going to be, and it's like...
Yeah, I really enjoy stouts in that like 5% range. I think it's like really cool to have. I mean, I enjoy stouts across the range really, but like
Yeah.
especially when it's cold, like having like a really nice like 7-8% stout. It's like
Yeah. Dude, it's like it's kind of a steer off the
delicious.
path of like a normal, like, at least that one in particular is like not a typical American stout. It's got plenty of characteristics that overlap, but it's like almost halfway between like a dark mild and an American stout. It's like still pretty delicate in some sense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The ABV thing is like really significant to me because it's like I could drink a few of these, you know,
Yep.
and that is important. In England, like if you order an average stout, it's probably going to be under 5%,
Yeah.
and you know, I guess the way people drink is a little different.
That's true.
But
There are people
I,
here
I
who
love
order
that I
beer
can have this
specifically
beer
for
and
the
like
high
it's
ABV.
like yeah.
That's another thing that you do great too. I mean, prior to the dark mild, we had your oatmeal stout on, and it's fucking exceptional.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I
Yep.
love that beer. I mean, you know,
Me too.
yeah. I've been we bottle condition it as well, and I like to take those home and have them. You know, I actually really like that beer ice cold. It's super nice, just like really cold
Oh,
stout.
alright.
You know, I mean, I know cold beer is like who'd have thought?
Unusual for you. For anybody again who doesn't totally dig into the difference between sort of regular draft and then cask ale, or as you hear Bill referring to it as real ale, which is generally how it's referred to everywhere but America. It's naturally fermented. It's carbonated inside its actual serving vessel, which means it's usually not as bubbly. It's a little bit dialed back in its carbonation, but it kind of makes it like kind of a chewier body sometimes, even though it's really light. And then it also is generally served a bit warmer, so it's also easier to drink.
Yeah,
And
cellar temperature, so
Yeah,
like
50,
50 to
yep.
55 as opposed to down at like 36, 38,
Yep.
yeah.
And no gas forcing it to your glass.
No.
Yep. It's got to be.
So, Bill, what is your CO2 level? Because camera says it should be 1.
Yeah, I don't. So, I mean, I think that's something where
Bill's
being
like, snitches
in,
get stitches, motherfucker.
being in the US, I think I think that, it's funny because on the one hand, we're like just a cask brewery in the US. So it's like, because we're one of the only ones, it's like we do what we want. And it's like, would it stand up to other stuff? I don't know. But I think that being here, we have to hold a bit of a higher standard in some ways as far as like making it appealing to average customers here.
All the normies that don't normally drink cask beer.
The tolerance for a flat beer is very low here
Sure.
in comparison to the UK.
Yeah.
So we you can only go so high with carbonation that it's going to pour through a beer engine and not like be just like an absolute nightmare to pour, like all foam. And so, I mean, basically we go for more like 1.7, 1.8, maybe up to 2
How dare
volumes
you?
of CO2. I know, right? To me, that's appropriate. I mean, I also like to pour our beer without a sparkler, a sparkler is like this little plastic nozzle that goes on the end of a beer engine spout that pours the beer through these tiny holes. It kind of the thing I equate it to is like nitro beer.
similar
Where
to
it pours
that.
it
They have a
through,
diffuser
gives
plate
it
in
this
them.
like creamy head,
Yep.
but the beer is fairly flat underneath. Being from culturally southern England, I didn't grow up with that. I don't really like that. I'm not totally against it. If I was in Manchester or Sheffield or Newcastle, I would drink whatever they do with the sparkler and be fine with it. But for me, the beer should be carbonated enough that it has a nice head, nice froth, nice foam, nice body without a sparkler. You don't need that to like create the head.
Not like those fucking nerds in Manchester who have to cheat, right?
Well, people in the north will complain about beer poured without a sparkler being like that, completely flat or like there's being no head. I think it should be the carbonation level in the beer allows that there is some head on the pint
for sure.
without a sparkler, and that's the way we've always done it, and the way I like it to be, and I think it makes it easier for people here to pour. The other thing is, a lot of people here will do gravity pours, so a gravity pour off the bar top. With that, the beer has to have a pretty good level of carbonation to pour with a decent head, much more than with a beer engine. So that's the difficulty. So if we're trying to sell casks for people to sell on the bar top, the carbonation level has to be up closer to 2 for the 2 volumes of CO2 to pour like pretty reasonably. The thing I get a little bit annoyed about is like when breweries sell pins for a bar top cask, and they're clearly like way overcarbonated, so they just like shoot out. I mean, I'm sure you've had experiences with these, right?
We've all had it.
Great stories.
Yeah.
We've all taken a beer shower
Great stories.
of an improperly prepared
I
cask.
get it. Like you want nobody wants to have their beer served flat. Like, I mean, that is just like it's
taboo in some ways,
Nobody
yeah.
wants that, especially in the US, like versus in the UK. I mean, if we're doing our jobs, it should just be right. It shouldn't be way over. It shouldn't be way under. It should just be about right. And
Word.
so, yeah.
I like the no sparkler. Matter of fact, I feel like there's a campaign coming on.
It sounds like it's starting.
What's your acronym?
It's going to be Spank. Sparklers, not cool. So yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what the Northerners are going to throw back at us, but
All right,
tough to beat the Spank.
let's get on those T-shirts.
I already texted a guy.
So, Bill, in the late 1886, a gaggle of blacksmiths that built cannons from the Woolworth Arsenal Armament Factory in southeast London formed a football team. They called themselves Dial Square. as a reference to the sundial at the entrance of the factory. Shortly thereafter, the club turned professional and changed the name to Woolworth Arsenal, becoming a full-fledged member of the Football League in 1893. Are you familiar with this team?
They're my favorite team, actually. Yeah.
What's the chances?
I don't know if you've been watching, but they're top of the league right now by 5 points. So, we're all very happy right now. It's actually, I mean, it's an exciting time to be an Arsenal fan, that's for sure.
Nice. I got that tip from one of your bartenders.
Okay, nice. That's some good history there. I mean, I learned something. Yeah.
Leave it to Ron. You said that when you got here, you felt like you learned a lot more about like your beer making than when you were actually working in the UK. Like, what do you think it was about like brewing beer up in the Northwest that kind of made for that crash course?
I think there's just like, I mean, I think this happens in sort of American culture versus British culture in general. Is like, I mean, people, there's not so much restraint. There's not so much respect for rules or like, sure. People will just people are ambitious. People want to get to, levels that they can. That they'll question anything if they think it can be better and, people.
It's a polite way of calling us all a bunch of assholes. We're ruthlessly ambitious.
For me, there's really important things both ways. I mean, I think having the tradition and the culture that's been respected for a long time is something that a lot of people here, I mean, say in the brewing industry, would love to have that kind of like, I mean, people are like making Helles and, Oktoberfests and, all these different beers that have like some kind of like cultural authenticity or whatever.
Okay.
But like that maybe like brewers here maybe are striving for, some sense of like grounding in a historical, like, cultural thing. But, I think in a lot of ways, the rest of the world is kind of like, I mean, certainly in Europe, like people are wanting to follow the American craft beer breweries, where they, especially the best ones, and the new things that people have created, the new like styles that people have created, the ways of doing things that people have like found out just by trying shit and figuring it out, in some ways, that brings the level higher, for sure.
We talk about that a lot, kind of like in the Northwest, how kind of the bar is set really high up here. And it's funny that it kind of, like, I think you're right, it kind of comes from a weird lack of respect for tradition, because like people are trying new shit all the time. Mm-hmm. But it's sort of to advance the techniques that they can apply when they do decide to make like a really great Czech dark lager. Like a lot of like the technology that gets discovered by fucking around kind of applies itself to like somebody making a really exceptional traditional style. And so the bar kind of keeps getting raised.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's true. I mean, I think for us it's fairly simple in that, like I say, like in England, you go to like a decent pub and get a pint of real ale, and it might be really good, but it might be a bit stale, might be a bit flat. Might be a bit warm even, ideally not. Mm-hmm. But like temperature control is not going to be like the optimum, most likely. And you're relying a little bit more on the culture and like the feeling and like this is how it is, and people are just drinking this pint by pint, and like you sort of accept it, and this is just how you like it. You sort of grow to like it because it's how it is.
Instead of...
Definitely here, like, there is a feeling like if it's not quite right, like, that's wrong. I think certainly with cask ale in the UK, it's like, there's a spectrum. Like, you have your... Say like, I grew up mostly drinking Adnams bitter, and I drink it in, a bunch of different pubs. and even in the same pub, like you could have it on one day, and the next day it might be not quite as good as it was the other day when you had it, just where it was in the firkin or what day, you know. Most of the pubs would go through at least a firkin a day, so like there's not really, it shouldn't be like a multi-day issue, more of just sort of, I don't know what would it be, but there's variation basically. You have that same beer that you like, whether it's Adnam's Bitter or Timothy Taylor Landlord or Harvey's Sussex Best, great beers, like amazing beers that would be recognized by brewers, you know, anybody, like worldwide. But you could have a bad pint of any of those beers, and that's like you sort of just accept that as a customer, you know,
sure.
like not necessarily a bad pint, but you got your like amazing pints that are just right, and you drink as many of them as you can, and then you have ones where you're like, you had one, and it was like, yeah, you know,
Clocking out early.
yeah. Here, you know, I think that people have a low tolerance. Like they're just gonna be like, you know, that was bad. It was bad. The beer is bad. The place is bad. Well, they're going to blame the beer and the brewery, and not necessarily the establishment
service, right.
or the service.
3.2.
So for us, I mean, I think we, you know, take that and be like, we have to make sure this is going to be like as good as possible all the time, and you know, sort of minimize the risk of, you know, really bad service, which is not easy to do. But,
I have never thought about it in those terms, but like you're so much more dependent on the actual service establishment in the UK.
Absolutely,
and that's not a thing here.
Hence the Sellerman Award.
Yeah,
I mean,
hence the Sellerman Award. Like,
people talk about the importance of, you know, proper draft service, cleaning your lines, all these different things, and it's not like that's not important.
sure.
But in comparison, it's like you know, not as big of
It's
a
not the
difference
same.
as
Yeah.
you know, making sure your casks are, you know, being
Cellared
served
properly,
right.
like
Yeah.
settle. Yeah.
And a lot
Yeah.
of our culture too, like another huge difference is, I mean, for example, like give me an English brewery like who makes the most different beers in the course of the year. How many would that number be?
Yeah, I mean,
That's right.
on the traditional level, like it would be more like, you know, 6 or 7 probably.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where our culture, right? Like, I think a lot of times, like people, like, you know, that's part of our, you know, craft beer culture is try things, try new stuff. But it's, you know, and it's so far apart from our, you know, our, you know, domestic forefathers, whereas like I drink this domestic beer.
Yep.
And you would know when that beer is like actually not cold, it's not right. Like, this isn't my fucking Coors Light. Like, but that's kind of not, it's tough around here. Like, you know, you definitely make a lot of beers all the time, make them really great. But, you know, we've got breweries that make 80 different beers in a year. And it's, I think you get a little slack when you're not,
Keep it
you
up.
know, right? I get to try something and then maybe it's a year and a half before I try it again. The memory gets a little foggy.
Yeah.
For you,
there
it
is that. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I think that for the most part,
Bull fucking shit. Jeez. No, my
Continue,
memory
Bill.
gets foggy. I'm saying like his isn't that good. It's not.
yeah, I mean, I think that kind of gives you more leeway when you have a beer that like you drink once a year or something,
Yeah.
as opposed to something that is like you want that to taste perfect every day. Like, I mean, there's this kind of a different game, right?
You loved your Adnams Bitter. Like, did you branch out much? If you had a choice and you were sitting in the pub, did you branch out?
No.
Yep.
Yeah. Even me, which is a fairly curious, you know,
Right.
drinker. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would be like, well, you know, this is the one I like. I'm just going to stick with that.
Yeah.
Unless it doesn't taste very good, and I'll try the other one. Yeah.
Man. I always like to branch out on the home or, you know, out and about. But, you know, my fridge was Sierra Nevada Green Label, good old pale ale for, I don't know, longer than my kids have been alive. And they're older than yours. A lot.
That's
That doesn't take much. Yeah.
it's crazy that because like we gush about your beer a lot. Like Colin was in here from Holy Mountain, and we
yeah.
we always have like wonderful things to say about your beer. And it's clear that you've spent a ton of time like adapting to a super dynamic, drastically changing kind of beer market in the Northwest, but still maintain this like kind of grounded sort of roots in your like English brewery upbringing. And that's, I don't know, how do you like balance that? How do you still maintain those roots and still put things out that are like fresh and new and like conceptually like really exciting?
I mean, that part is kind of easy because just we're curious. I kind of dictate the situation on the brewing front, but I have a brewer now, Justin, who's doing great, and I've had brewers before that, Jake, also great, and like they have ideas, they want to like contribute things, and we talk about stuff. I mean, we're just curious. We want to try stuff. We try other people's beers and get ideas. I mean, there's a billion different beers to design out there that you could just try, and there's a billion bad ideas, and there's there's good ideas in there too. I mean, and there's things that maybe it's a bad idea, but you can execute it well, and it like kind of works out. So, I think you sort of try and balance that, but also try and figure out what you can sell and how you can sell it. I mean, for us, we're in a transition right now of like having to relocate our business. We're in this like, we could easily just close Machine House next year very easily. And I don't want to do that. I'm working on ways to not do that. But I'm also kind of recognizing, well, we have to actually make money as a business, which we haven't really done for the last 10 years. And, well, no shit, we've been trying to sell cask beer in the U.S. So
get your act together, Washington.
But isn't that why you opened Central District?
Well,
to get into a more neighborhood?
We tried. That was an up and down situation. It may be more like that would be a long-term, way to go. But, we're in this position where it's like, well, the main thing that's gotten us a good reputation and been, kind of the most positive thing for us is the styles that we do and the way we do them. But they're very difficult to sell. So, we're kind of working on, well, like how can we retain what's really cool about what we do, but make it more accessible to more people. Yeah. Especially more wholesale accounts, more bars, more restaurants, and even more stores as well. I mean, we bottle conditioned beer, which is maybe the closest representation of a cask ale in a packaged product, but I mean, everybody knows bottles are not like the hottest selling, off-premise thing right now. Yeah. So
shrinking
like,
shelf space
they're
everywhere.
forced to the lower levels.
I mean, we're looking at, well, can we do these beers? Can we do something that's unique, that's very Machine House, that works, that people can pour on a regular draft system, that we can put into cans, that people can have in stores. Like, it feels like we can't like ignore the market realities there. That maybe we tried to ignore for a while. And honestly, I feel like we were doing a really good job and it was building into a good place.
I agree.
Until COVID.
There's a lot of people who listening who might not know. I get to sell Bill's beer. Like him and I have worked together for a little while now. And it sells fucking great. And I honestly can't believe how much we move of it.
Yeah, I mean, for what we do, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, the market realities, like you said, they're fucking brutal and unrelenting. And people's buying decisions are dictated by all sorts of things. And oftentimes it is not always the quality of the beer, which is a bummer.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm a cask beer fan. I love it. This is what I wanted to bring to, the scene here, like quality traditional style cask beers. But I also recognize that, when I see a brewery like Bizarre popping up draft beers, but like session beers and, a bitter and a like low ABV stout. This stout I'm drinking from Single Hill right now, that's 5%, like super delicious, just served on draft. I mean, it's not like these aren't against my, I totally value these things. And I think if we can continue what we do with our cask beer and our bottles, but add, stuff that's a little more accessible, that will really help us. And I think that either way, I mean, we have to make sure we can continue our business first of all. If we can't do that,
Speaking
then
of
there's
which, if you're
nothing.
listening and you have listings for business spaces in Tacoma, please email them to Craig.
Yeah, we'd love to get Bill
We want
local.
Bill down here making beer, man.
Yeah.
Tacoma has a lot of great breweries, but there's nobody really doing the stuff that you're doing. Really not anybody like that in Washington, but there's plenty of space.
Yeah.
When
So
you do branch out, like, your beers are great. Like, I feel like based on listening to you talk, like, you can see where you're, getting out there and trying things, and the product's always great. I mean, barley wine on cask to me, too. Like, I know that's not necessarily branching out. But, oh, my goodness, because we throw a hell of a barley wine party, and to kind of be a shining star at barley wine brunch, I don't know, I feel like it's a big deal. And it was.
That's awesome. I'm glad
Fucking
to hear
cask
it.
beer was
that's a
incredibly good.
smoking
It was
beer
so
on a
good.
cask, man.
It was so good.
Oh,
My God. Yeah.
Yeah, we love our barley wines, and we release quite a few of them. So, we have a couple coming up, actually. I know you're drinking it. Well, we have a barley wine we brewed in the spring that we just let bottle condition just sit. Not barrel aged, just simple, well made. It's been sitting for a decent amount of time now. That'll be out in a few weeks. And next spring, you say you're drinking a wheat wine right now. This is my brewer Justin's idea. Actually, is to brew a triticale wine. So this is Skagit Valley's triticale malt, hefty proportion of that. I haven't seen a triticale wine before.
nope.
A little hard to say, actually. But
Even funnier once you've had a couple. So I say,
I'm sure.
yes, please.
Yeah.
This is going to be great.
That'll be out in the spring. I mean, we're kind of celebrating 10th anniversary next year, so we're trying to
exciting,
come
man.
up with some fun beers for that, and that'll be one of them in the spring. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Doug just gave me the few minute warning. We should squeeze in a fuck up story if you have one, and if you do, is there one related to your stinging nettle beer? Have you ever gotten into some shenanigans harvesting stinging nettle for your stinging nettle beer?
Oh man, I mean, I'm a pro, really. You just bring gloves, and that's as simple as it gets. What's
This
the worst
is a vibe
place?
of confidence I've never experienced in my life.
What's the worst place I've gotten stung? Is that what the question?
Never accidentally wiped with
No, I grew up around stinging nettles. I got stung all over the place, just all my childhood. So I'm pretty used to it. Actually, it doesn't bother me that much. Harvesting the stinging nettles.
Damn it.
I mean,
maybe once.
I don't want to disappoint, but
But you've never
brewing
fucked
our
up on
stinging nettles is pretty textbook. I can make something up if you like. That time that
I'll make
We asked
something up
Ron for a fuck up story too. He didn't tell me anything. Both of you guys are the epitome of
I don't know why.
morphine-induced
I don't know why
confidence.
everyone doesn't pick stinging nettles for their seasonal beers. It's,
Because dandelions are so cheap.
Damn it. Ron, you have to tell a fuck up story then.
I have to go deep into my 20s.
How much time do... I mean,
Or do
I can
3
save
minutes?
you one more.
We
3
can-
minutes?
Did I already tell you the House of Blues story with the hot pepper?
Nope.
Okay, fantastic. So, I was in Vegas at the House of Blues, and I got this jambalaya, and there was a big old habanero on top. And so I use my hands, and I rip it up and disperse it in my food. And at some point, I rub my eye. Okay. Holy shit. So it's time to go to the bathroom, and this is the fuck up story.
They only had stinging nettles.
I had never gone in a bathroom in my life and seen a bathroom attendant.
Oh.
Like the person sitting there with all the colognes and stuffs and just watching you. And that really kind of threw me off my game. So somewhere in my dumbass little head, I was like, well, I don't want to wash my hands, pee, and then wash my hands, right? Because if there's one thing, I am efficient. So I went pee, and then I washed my hands and flushed out my eye. And, oh my God. Oh, I was walking like I'd been horseback riding for a week and a half. Yeah, let's hustle down this strip. Like, can we get a cab? Like, I was poor at the time. We don't have cab money.
This is in Vegas.
Yeah, it's in Vegas.
The fucking like dry heat, man.
Well, I mean, I guess the positive point is like, this is still when they'd hand you out all like the stripper baseball cards and something. And I could feel like I could confidently be like, no, obviously, I'm good. Duh.
Shit.
That didn't stay in Vegas.
Yeah, that was worse. It was multiple days. Like,
Whoa.
it was good. I've done several lesser versions, but
Jesus Christ.
that was the grand champion.
Bill, before Ron takes us out, thank you a ton for coming down.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you
you
so
very
much.
much.
Thanks
awesome
for
to talk
having
to
me.
you.
It's
Yeah.
great to be down here.
And yeah, if we're going to be sending listings your way for Tacoma.
Of course,
Please,
yeah. I'm all ears.
And school districts and like the whole research. Like,
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
You know I don't have time for this stuff, so like, yeah.
Yeah,
We got you, man.
We know people.
Preschools,
We got people for
kindergartens, all this stuff, yeah.
All right, Grit and Grainers, email us at cheers@gritandgrainpodcast.com with your comments, opinions, and access to our tub, pail, can, basket, canister, vat, kettle, cask, pot, keg, barrel, and bowl, or as we call it, our bucket list. We read and drink everything we receive, and we try to respond as quickly as we can, if not online, then on air. You can subscribe to Grit and Grain on Apple Music, Spotify, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and please leave us a review. Also, check us out on channel 253 and gritandgrainpodcast.com. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for episode notes, beer news, and the Command Center for Charlie Brown specials such as It's Flash Beagle, Charlie Brown, or You're Not Elected, Charlie Brown, or Try My Flugelhorn, Charlie Brown, and of course, a Charlie Brown Thanksgiving where that rude peppermint patty grabs Marcy and invades Charlie Brown's Thanksgiving to make toast, popcorn, pretzels, and jelly beans, which makes no sense. Toast I get, pretzels fine, but what kid makes his own popcorn, especially in 1973? And where the hell does one find jelly beans in November? Were these left over from the Easter Beagle? If this podcast is not what you expected, please alter your expectations. What's a pirate's favorite football club? Arrrrrrsenal. No such thing as bad time to visit Tacoma. No such thing as too much barley wine. Woo! Tune in next Friday for more sweet chatter. Cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Thanks again for tuning in. Don't forget to follow us at Grit and Grain Podcast wherever you get your social media and catch new episodes every Friday. Cheers.
This is channel 253.
Get up.